Hi, my name is Merve Özgürek. Today I'm reflecting on the story The Stolen Generations and the impact it had on me after listening the video. Before listening to this story, I knew that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people had experienced discrimination, but honestly didn't understand the depth of the trauma and injustice they faced. I realized that knowing something happened in history is very different from understanding the experience of the people who lived through it. While listening to the story, I experienced many emotions. I felt sadness, shock, and strong sense of discomfort because the stories were not just about history, they were about real people, real children, and real families. I found it difficult to concentrate at some points because I was trying to process how this experience could have happened. Hearing about children being removed from their families, separated from their culture, and losing their connection to their identity was extremely difficult to listen. The part that affected me the most was learning that some Aboriginal children were called by numbers instead of their names. This stayed with me because a name is such an important part of who we are. Our name connected us to our family, our identity, and our sense of belonging. When I heard that children were denied something so basic, I felt deeply upset. It made me think about how much was taken away from them, not only physically through separation from their families, but also emotionally through the loss of identity and connection. I found myself asking how anyone could believe that treating children in this way was acceptable. No child deserved this kind of treatment, and no authority should ever have the power to justify action that take away a person's dignity and humanity. This story challenged my previous assumptions because I realized that my understanding of the stolen generation was limited. Before listening, I thought I knew about this part of Australian history, but I had only understood it from a general perspective. I had not really thought about the personal experience, emotions, and long term impacts on Aboriginal people and families. This experience reminded me that we cannot fully understand someone's experience by only knowing the facts. We need to listen to people's voice and take time to understand their lived experience. One of the biggest challenge I experienced while listening was meaning my own emotional response. I found myself feeling angry and heartbroken because the experience shared were so painful. At times, I found it difficult to continue focusing because I was imagining what those children and families must have felt. However, I learned that these uncomfortable emotions were part of the learning process. Deep listening means being willing to um, sit with difficult feelings and acknowledge experience that may challenge our understandings. This reflection connected strongly with the idea of Daderi, which described deep listening and being fully present when connected with others. Daderi helped me understand that listening is more than simply hearing words. It requires patience, respect, and openness. When I listen to the story of the stolen generation, I try to listen with my whole self by paying attention to the emotions and experience behind the story, not just the information being shared. I also reflect on the different levels of listening and how my listening developed during this experience. Deep listening includes moving behind the simply receiving information and developing an understanding of another person's feeling and perspective. The level of empathic listening was the most meaningful for me because I was not only learning about what happened, I was trying to understand the emotional experience of those involved. I found myself thinking about what it would feel like to lose your family, your culture, and your identity. This experience also made me reflect on privilege, race, and inclusion. I realized that I have always had important parts of my identity protected, such as my family, my connections, my name, and my sense of belonging. These were things I never had to question. However, listening to the story helped me understand that many Aboriginal children were denied these basic human connections. This made me reflect on my own privilege and understand that inclusion is much deeper than simply being kind of welcoming. Inclusion means recognizing people, histories, respecting their identities, and making sure their voices are valued. The concept of belonging became more meaningful to me through this reflection as Somsian explained that belonging is created when children's identities, relationships, and experience are recognized and valued. Listening the story helped me understand how important family, culture, and identity are for a person's sense of belonging. When these connections are taken away, it can have lasting impact on a person's understanding of who they are and where they belong. As a featured early childhood teacher, this experience has changed the way I think about relationship with children and families. It reminded me that every child and family has a story, and educators have responsibility to listen carefully and respectfully. In my future practice, I want to listen more deeply and empathically to children and families rather than making assumptions about their experiences. I want to create an environment where children feel safe to share their identities, cultures, and stories, and where families feel respected and included.